4. Pointers on pineapples. The early mass distribution of the pineapple around the world can probably be attributed in a very real sense to numerous inadvertent after-dinner gardeners of a pioneer sort. On his second voyage in 1493, Columbus found the inhabitants of Guadeloupe eating what looked to him to be very curious fruits. At that time, modern agriculture had not yet made a bigger and better pineapple than nature. The specimens Columbus saw reminded him of large pine cones, hence the name derived from the Spanish pina. Only 50 years later, Spanish and Portuguese sailing ships had carried pineapples all over the world, and they were under cultivation wherever the climate allowed, which pineapples, being not too particular, included lots of places. They took most enthusiastically to the Orient, or vice versa. What permitted this unusually rapid spread of the pineapple, even by slow boat to China, was what also makes it an ideal after-dinner crop. For one thing, the vegetative parts of the plant are very resistant to drying out and wilting. They will withstand months of storage in a ship's hold or your grocer's cellar. Secondly, all it takes to start a pineapple plant is the crown or top of the fruit. Given a climate not actually hostile, pineapple plants sprouted wherever they were eaten, and their tops were relegated to the dump or more likely thrown heedlessly along the roadway or path after dinner. Grown indoors, of course, the pineapple doesn't have the advantages of tropic skies. In the rarefied stratosphere of an air-conditioned apartment, in fact, it might have a struggle against starvation. It likes atmosphere, but it's not so particular about its bed. It can have a fairly shallow pot. The roots of the pineapple do not grow deep. The soil to plant it in is no problem either. The mixture for the pineapple is straight from the kitchen, at least in part. Ever since the budget stopped calling for using the coffee grinds twice, I've wondered if there weren't some use to which they could put. We drink an awful lot of coffee, and the plumber insists, firmly contrary to one of Susan's most stubbornly cherished household remedies, that pouring grounds down the sink drain is not helpful in preventing its clogging. It was on that same visit that he also gave me a lecture on roots, pebbles, and other vagrants from the garden in the kitchen sink trap. Coffee grounds are high in acid. If there's one thing pineapple love, it's rich, organic, acidic soil. Putting two and two together, I decided on a soil mixture of half potting soil, 1/4 humus, and 1/4 coffee grounds. Before they are used as a planting medium, the coffee grounds should be rinsed until the water running through them comes out fairly clear. Then they should be thoroughly dried. Baking them on a cookie tin until well done is much preferable to spreading them out on a newspaper to dry. Or so I've been told by Susan, who feels we already have enough things drying on assorted, spread out newspapers all over the apartment. Besides which, drying them in the oven, while it doesn't give the effect roasting original beans does, still adds a cozy aroma in the kitchen. The green top of the pineapple is what you lob off for planting. taking about an inch of the fruit with it. Let it rest a day or two before planting, then bury the fruit slice so the soil comes right up to the bottom of the ground. To set the cutting properly, I give it a good heavy watering. Also, since discovering liquid fertilizer, I spray a weak dilution of it on the ground the first day of the planting to help speed up initial growth. This somewhat strange application of fertilizer is very important to the pineapple because of its esoteric family tree. Originating in the Mato Grosso region of Brazil and Paraguay, the pineapple belongs to the family of Bromeliaceae, all of whose members are native to Latin America except Spanish moss, which perversely is native to the west coast of Africa. Most of the Bromeliaceae are epiphytic plants, sometimes known as air plants because they take their nourishment not from the soil but from substances dissolved in the rain or dew. Epiphytic plants like orchids and mosses quite often cling to the bark of living trees high up from the jungle floor without feasting on their host the way a parasite would. Others, including some lichens, grow on the ground but again do not take their sustenance from it. The pineapple does grow roots properly delving down into the soil, but they are shallow and not as effective as the leaves in gathering nutrients. Although not a true epiphytic plant anymore, the pineapple still absorbs dissolved material in dew, rain, or home bottled spray falling on its leaves more readily than anything spoon-fed its roots. While we have no air conditioning to deprive the pineapples of access to normal air, and city water has goodness knows what in it anymore, I still worried about undernourishment. Commercial growers dose their pineapple plants with enough fertilizer to remain in the ground for some time, and I decided to do the same. That's how I mutilated my first two pineapple plants. Although it's an excellent, almost essential way to foster their growth, in my enthusiasm, I neglected the old saw about too much of a good thing. The fertilizer, about a thimbleful, was too strong for the tender crown and proceeded to burn all the tiny new leaves. They came up brown and wilted at their points, though extraordinarily healthy the rest of the way down. The mature leaves that made up the crown had holes burned right through them. One of the plants stopped growing altogether. A month later, I stopped beside it on my jungle round, idly wondering what first aid I could possibly give it, and suddenly noticed a bright green knob looking for all the world like a dunce's cap poking out from under a bushy brim of leaves. The plant had decided to give up on the crown and sent out a new shoot which thrived. This procedure is quite a normal one for pineapple plants, even when they haven't been overdosed with fertilizer. Such shoots are of two main types: the ratoon, which comes out beneath the soil and develops its own root system, and the aerial sucker, which even by WC field standards doesn't get an even break, having no roots at all. Both the ratoon and the aerial sucker can be separated from the parent pineapple once they have developed half a dozen healthy leaves. The ratoon, needless to say, will have a head start on planting. My experience with liquid fertilizer needn't deter you from spraying your pineapples. Just be sure you keep it a fourth or less the recommended strength. If the instructions are to add 2 spoonfuls of fertilizer, for instance, add only half a spoonful. But water each pineapple well and make sure the crown gets a thorough dousing. Try to avoid a fertilizer high in phosphates. The pineapple doesn't take well to them. And if you want to feel like a real pro, read the ingredients given for available fertilizers and select one that relies on an ammonium compound rather than a sodium one for nitrogen. Many of our friends trying to start a pineapple top at home complain that it just sits there, green as ever but not growing anywhere. Usually the problem is that the pineapple is suffering, as it does readily, from iron deficiency anemia, otherwise known as tired sap. A little extra iron makes a noticeable difference. I used to put old staples and broken tacks in the soil, thinking they would rust in no time and supply all the iron the plant could want. Not so. Although rusting tacks and staples can eventually make available the kind of iron pineapple roots can swallow, the complex chemical process involved takes a long time and can't always be counted on to occur when you want it to. My pineapples sat on their bed of nails, not rising an inch. Then one day at the local florist's, I discovered and immediately pounced upon a packet of sequestrin made by Gary Chemical and containing instant available iron. It really did the trick. I now use it generously and fairly frequently, about once a month, on my pineapples and, for that matter, every once in a while on all the other plants to supplement regular fertilization. For best results with pineapples, as witness my enthusiastic blunder, dilute it to about a fourth the recommended strength and apply it with a spray bottle to the leaves and particularly the crown. Watch closely for browning and other signs of fertilizer burn. Burning a leaf or even the crown itself will rarely kill the plant, but it does make it less attractive. Under outdoor cultivation, a crown cutting is supposed to mature and bear in 24 to 30 months. None of my pineapple plants is that old yet, and I suspect it will take them longer to fruit, apartment bound. But I have seen pineapples, if diminutive ones, grown indoors. The pineapple, incidentally, is a multiple fruit. The flowers, 100 or more, grow clustered on a spike rising from the crown. When they are fertilized, they fuse together to form what we know as the pineapple itself. Even without its fruits, the pineapple is an interesting and decorative plant. The variety sold in supermarkets is the smooth cayenne, which luckily, as the name implies, doesn't have the sharp, saw-tooth edge of the wilder species. It is adaptable to varying conditions. Although these pineapples like lots of sunshine once they have rooted, I've grown them successfully with no direct sunlight at all. But should you have hopes for their fruiting, they will need several hours of sunlight a day and a constant temperature between 75 and 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Below 65 degrees, the plant thinking it's cold in cold storage, will become dormant, ceasing to grow. Much above 90 degrees, it suffers from a case of excessive transpiration and respiration. That is to say, it sweats profusely and feels it's just too hot to do anything. Actually, you might be better off if your pineapple doesn't fruit. You won't be so tempted to lop off the top of your very own homegrown pineapple and the next to keep the home chain growing. It's easier somehow to force yourself to throw out the tops of supermarket smooth cayennes, and things can get out of hand. One may keep eating pineapples indefinitely if one likes them, but all those sproutable spiny tops. In the Philippines, they've been making a fine pinna cloth from the fiber of the leaves since the 1600s. I don't know how they do it, but someday I intend to go and find out. After all, I've got to do something with all the pineapple plants that are scrambling over the window ledge.